For decades now, Robert Kiyosaki has been this huge and, let's be real, often controversial voice in the world of personal finance. And his ideas, they've literally changed the way millions of us think about money, about work, and about what it means to build wealth. And this quote, this is pretty much the heart of his entire philosophy. The idea is simple, right? You can never have true freedom without financial freedom. That single thought, well, it's the launch pad for everything we're got to get into. So where did this all come from? Well, the foundation of Kiyosaki's whole worldview really comes from his childhood. He had these two father figures who mentored him. There was his own dad, who he calls his poor dad, a super educated government employee. And then there was his friend's dad, his rich dad, an entrepreneur who really started from scratch. And this is where you see the huge difference. I mean, it's night and day. His poor dad's advice, it was the classic path, right? Study hard, get good grades, find a safe, secure job. But his rich dad, totally different advice. He said, don't work for money. Learn how money works so it can work for you. We're talking about two completely different playbooks for how to live your life. Okay, so these two totally opposing mindsets, they led Kiyosaki to create this really simple but honestly pretty profound framework. It's a way to categorize how basically everyone earns their income. And he calls it the cash flow quadrant. So this is it. This is the map he created. You've got 4 letters. E is for employee, S is for self-employed or specialist, B is for business owner, and I is for investor. And here's the kicker. According to Kiyosaki, where your money comes from is actually way more important than how much you make. So just take a second and really think about this for yourself. Based on how you make a living right now, which one of these quadrants are you in? And hey, this isn't about judging, not at all. It's just about being aware of where you are. All right, let's break this down a bit. The left side, the E and the S quadrants, that's where most people are. As an employee, what do you value most? Security. As someone who's self-employed, it's all about independence, right? You want to be your own boss. Now, the right side of the quadrant, that's a different world. A business owner doesn't own a job, they own a system that makes money. And an investor, well, their money is doing all the work for them. The whole goal in Kiyosaki's view is to move from the left side to the right. But that's not just a job change, it's a massive mental shift. You have to go from wanting security to embracing leverage and, yeah, a little bit of risk. So the big question is, how do you even begin to make that shift? Well, Rich Dad taught Kiyosaki this one single, absolutely crucial lesson that everything else is built on. And it's all about understanding the real difference between an asset and a liability. And his definition is shockingly simple. An asset is anything that puts money in your pocket. That's it. It generates positive cash flow. It pays you to own it. That is the one and only test. And a liability? Well, it does the exact opposite. It takes money out of your pocket. It has costs, it has expenses, it literally costs you money just to own it. And that simple test, does it put money in or take money out? That is everything. And this right here is where the mindsets totally split. The rich, they focus on one thing, buying assets that generate even more income. But the middle class, or so Kiyosaki argues, tends to buy liabilities, like that fancy car or even their family home, and they think they're assets. And that's what traps people in that cycle of just working to pay the bills. So what does a true asset look like? Well, here are a few examples. We're talking about a business that runs without you having to be there every day, or stocks and bonds that pay you, real estate that actually generates income, even things like royalties from a book or a patent. You see the pattern? All of these things put money back into your pocket. Okay, so this philosophy has been around for decades, but how does it apply to the world we're living in right now? Well, it's actually the fuel for some pretty urgent and honestly some pretty scary predictions that Kiyosaki is making today. And it's really important to see the connection here. His whole philosophy, his distrust of the traditional financial system, and his focus on real, tangible assets, that directly feeds into the very loud warnings he's giving about the global economy right now. And trust me, his message is loud and clear. He's warning about a massive crash, possibly in 2026, that he thinks could be the biggest in history. Why? Because, in his words, the world is just buried under a mountain of debt that can never, ever be repaid.
So, what's his advice? If you believe this is coming, how do you protect yourself? He says you need to hedge, and he points to tangible and decentralized assets. Basically, stuff that exists outside the normal financial system. We're talking precious metals like gold and silver, things that have held value for centuries. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and even direct investments in things like oil wells.
But let's pause here and look at this from another angle. Is all of this intense focus on stacking up assets and bracing for a crash, does that actually lead to a rich life or just a life with riches? I mean, that's the big question his critics always bring up, right? If you make wealth the absolute center of your universe, what's the cost? Are you pushing aside other, maybe equally important parts of just being human? So the critics really point to a few main things. First, they say the whole philosophy can be pretty imbalanced, that in this constant hunt for assets, it might ignore how important things like relationships and just personal growth are. Second, they say it kind of glosses over real-world inequalities. It can sound like anyone can get rich just by thinking differently, and we know it's not always that simple. And finally, some say it just oversimplifies everything and really downplays the huge risks that come with investing and owning a business. Which brings us to maybe a more nuanced way to look at all this. Maybe the goal isn't just about getting rich. Maybe it's about using all this financial knowledge as a tool to find a more personal, a more profound kind of freedom. And what's really interesting is that Kiyosaki himself often quotes the famous monk Thich Nhat Hanh, who said, "The path is the goal." And that hints at something deeper, doesn't it? That maybe the journey, the learning, the growing is the real prize, not just having a pile of money at the end. Kiyosaki actually talks about 4 key areas of development we all need: mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. And his big argument is that our school system only really cares about the mental part, which leaves a lot of really smart people totally unprepared for life. So when you look at it that way, financial education isn't the whole game. It's just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. And that totally reframes the whole conversation. Maybe being financially literate isn't about greed. Not at all. Maybe it's just a tool. A really powerful tool that gives you options. It gives you the freedom to go find and follow whatever your true path is. So that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Just forget about getting rich for a second and ask yourself this. The path that you're on right now, in your job, with your money, in your life, is it actually leading you toward what you would call true freedom?